There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Ericka is back from Baton Rouge. Ericka, welcome back.
Thank you, Sean.
What a coincidence. We're both wearing the same outfits we had on the last time we chatted.
What? How does that ever happen? What a coincidence.
And you've gotten yourself a new bottle of Kayo Japanese whiskey, and you've drunk it right down to the same level as our last talk a month ago. That's just uncanny. We're here to talk about an Irish novel, The Convictions of John Delahunt by Andrew Hughes, which I've never heard of him. I've never heard of the novel, and you loved it. Tell us about it and tell us why.
I did. Okay, so I love a gritty, dark Victorian story. I'm kind of like, who wouldn't love that? So it's set in Ireland in the 19th century. It's briefly about John Delahunt, and when we meet him at the very beginning of the story, he's in jail about to be hanged. So he's confessing his crime before he goes to be executed. And he is convicted of murder. And the whole story unfolds that he used to be an informer for Dublin Castle, which is kind of this nefarious, corrupt police organization.
Dublin Castle is the name of an organization.
Yes. There you go. Yeah.
Not just the name of a castle.
Yeah, I was very confused. So they want John to be an informer, and he finds out that he's pretty good at it, that he can track down stories and find out what happened for crimes and things like that, and inform on people. So then he realizes, hey, there's money to be made here. So he gets a little in over his head because he starts to commit crimes or frame people so that he can cash in on informing on people. Almost
kind of like a double agent sort of thing.
Yeah. So that he can make more money to support his new wife, who comes from a nice family. And his wife, their relationship gets pretty gross and sad.
Pretty gross, really?
And sad. And yeah, though I loved it. I don't know if it's a Sean book. If you say you don't like things that are, I guess, gory. It's not so much gory. I'll just tell you, I pulled this up because I wanted to kind of
great.
It's how I felt about it. I just said the writing was immersive, and dare I use the cliche, atmospheric. It was gory and horrid and dirty and full of suffering and cutthroat self-interest, and I loved it.
Well, that sounds like my love life in the 90s. But you said gross. Their relationships gets gross. So I'm curious about that. Can you elaborate a bit if it's not spoiler to do so?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, right. But she is very of an upper class background. And then when she starts to live with John and they're trying to scrape by, and she becomes pregnant and decides she does not want to be pregnant at that time. And so her life kind of falls into depravity.
Very interesting.
And so her true nature sort of comes out. So she's not this sweet thing that he thought that he married, and she's actually not that nice of a person either. So There's nobody that has any redemptive qualities. Everyone's horrible. And yet I'm still kind of cheering for John the whole time, even though I know he's a murderer and he's a horrible person. It's kind of like you love to hate him kind of character. Yeah, I thought of some other books that are similar, like The North Water by Ian McGuire. If you liked that, then this would be a good fit for you. Mary Toft or The Rabbit Queen by Dexter Palmer. If you liked that, this might be a good fit. Or Perfume, Patrick Susskind. Definitely same kind of genre. So
okay. Interesting. And I don't know those books. Not familiar with those books, or I haven't read them. I'm familiar with Perfume. Now, and it's based on a true story. Was it John Delahunt that did all these things, or most of them?
Yes, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the blurb describes the characters as a Dickensian cast of.
Yes.
So
yeah,
colorful, memorable. Is there any humor?
No.
Not that kind of Dickensian.
No. No. Everything is. I just, you could almost smell the book happening as you read. It's just, everything's dirty and everyone's in poverty and everything is just horrible, but it's a fascinating book. I believe I listened to the audio, and the audio was very well done. Audiobook was
okay.
Was,
and it's not that new. I mean, it first was published in 2011, but
right.
I love the backlist. I love finding out what stuff I've heard of from the backlist.
It's been sitting on my shelf for years, and one of those, I'm going to read that someday, and then it just struck me. It's like, I think I need to read this now. Good timing.
And Andrew Hughes lives in Dublin. He used to be an archivist, so hence the historical bent. And this is his debut novel. He has looks like 2 works of history, and then another novel called The Coroner's Daughter, which you might want to try if you like this one.
Yeah.
2015. I'm not sure about this one, but I'm glad that it came on. Again, especially if it's an audiobook, I might try it on audio and see how I get along with it. But it certainly doesn't sound boring.
No, really good pacing. Even if you know what's coming, it's still a good read. There were some things I didn't expect, and it's good. It's a good sort of police procedural murder mystery, even though he's convicted at the end. It's just, how does he get there? Kind of book.
It seems like whenever I talk to you, I get really curious about the title. The Convictions of John Delahunt, and convictions is plural, and there's of course the 2 meanings of convictions, one of in a court of law, and the other one is the beliefs. So is there something about his belief system?
At the end, there's a little unexpected happening. How he ends up in prison is not what you would think. And he does have a bit of I would say an epiphany, maybe a catharsis, ever so slightly.
Well, you've done it again, Ericka. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Vansa is back yet again from India. Vansa, hello.
Hi, Sean. Nice to be back again.
You and I are going to talk today about a quite new novel out of the UK called Blasted Things by Lesley Glaister, which is set in the immediate or in the post-World War I London, if I understand correctly. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'd like you to fill in all the details. Tell us about it.
Right. So I've read quite a few World War I and II books. This one is a little different from the others. The section, it focuses more on the aftermath of the war, on people and both their physical and psychological traumas. And also Glaister makes it a point to show you how it's easier relatively to recover from the traumas of it if you have a decent enough financial backing, and if you're not also worried about your economic future and how you're going to make a living. So the book opens in 1917 in World War I with our female protagonist, Clementine, who is a volunteer nurse at the Western Front. She's in Flanders. And there's a bit of, so there's a very well-written section set there, because she captures the very frenetic pace, the complete shock that they feel at the scale of the horrors that they're seeing, because Clementine wasn't involved in the medical profession earlier, and World War I was unimaginable for a lot of people. The scale was unprecedented. The action then shifts to 1920. Clementine has survived the war, at least physically she has, but there's parts for instance, she lost someone that she was in love with, that she fell in love with during her stint at Flanders. She's married to someone who did not serve in World War I and who prefers not to speak about it at all to her, and hopes that mentally she'll be okay with just that, when she's clearly not. And this was a time before there was actual professional counseling or anything. So the characters don't really have the tools to understand what they're going through mentally. And the other main character is Vincent Fortune, who used to be a door-to-door salesman before the war, who was a sergeant in the war and was injured very badly. And because of his injuries, he can't go back to his earlier job. This is where actually Glaister brings out the nuances of the difficulties of being in particular social classes in a society that was still fairly stratified, because the entire Edwardian notion of class had not been completely eliminated yet. And Vincent Fortune can't go back to his old job. He was pretty much an up-and-coming salesman. He was practically middle class, but now he's had to take up a job where he's sort of like a handyman in a pub, and he can't figure his way out of it, and he finds it very hard to make a living, to be financially secure, and sort of make more of himself as he sees it. And the two characters meet by accident.
Literally, I think.
Literally, yes. Literally by accident. And Clementine feels drawn to Fortune because she leads a fairly cloistered life, because there's several people her husband doesn't approve of her socializing with, because they're not of their social class, or he feels that so it's very, and she doesn't meet people who've been through the war and who have those experiences. And also he physically resembles her lost love.
Uh-huh.
So she feels a bit drawn to him. And Vincent Fortune sees that here is an opportunity, maybe for him to make a little money, maybe for him to realize his fairly meager dreams of owning a pub. And so the plot unfurls from there. But more than just actually what happens to the characters, Glaister, I feel, wants to use this as an opportunity to explore the fallout of the war on the people who survived it as well.
And that man, his name is what?
Vincent Fortune.
He's a bit of a dark character.
He is. He's a very interesting character, because before the war, he had a comfortable life and he saw a pretty good future for himself. But the war upended all of that, and he didn't even have a choice in any of that.
And he was badly injured and wears kind of a face
He wears
mask.
a sort of mask. Yes, he wears a sort of facial prosthetic because he's very badly injured.
And in less capable hands, it would be very easy to make him the villain of the piece. And from the reviews I've read, including yours, Glaister doesn't go there. So it's a very nuanced portrait, and there's no black and white characters. Everybody's got a little bit of gray in them.
Exactly. That's very true. Like you've said, even Clementine's husband could have easily been made into a very unsympathetic villain who doesn't really care about her. But yeah, Glaister doesn't do that with all her characters. She's deeply sympathetic to all of them.
I am intrigued by the title, Blasted Things, because I think it's not just things that are blasted in this novel, or is it?
Exactly. I mean, there are literal blasts that have caused the effects that they have, but those effects have lasted long beyond the actual event, and long beyond the actual physical scars that they've left. What's really tragic, but what's also realistic in the book for me, was that when you're not worried about how you're going to make a living, and when you're already from a particular social class, it's easier for you to think about the future, because that's one less thing that you have to worry about. But in Vincent Fortune's case, that's apart from all his physical problems, and he clearly is suffering from what we would call PTSD, and his inability to get any help for it or understanding. There's also the question of how is he going to support himself?
Now, you give it 4 stars, not 5. So what prevented it from being a 5-star read for you?
So what prevented it from being a 5-star review was some of the writing was, it was a little clunky. The sentences, it was a little clunky. And some of the characters sort of went in rather cliched ways, and they behaved in cliched ways. So while it was a very good book, just because of that, I knocked off 1 star for it.
There could have been.
It is still a good book, though.
There could have been a little more nuance in the characterization.
Of some. The main characters are very well drawn. One character, especially, her name is Harry. She's her sister-in-law, Clementine's sister-in-law. Her writing was a little cliched. So, and there were some bits which I felt were a little repetitive. Okay. So,
how long is this book? It is about 300.
Long. I think it's around 300 pages. Yeah, it's not very long.
So while Glaister did a really good job at creating nuanced main characters, some of those minor characters could have used a little more nuance. Would that be fair?
Yeah. And also, though, I think Glaister's done a very good job in firstly giving us a different perspective of World War I from all the other World War I novels, really. This is another slightly unique perspective, which does take into account that people of different classes did suffer unequally. Some did more than others. So, of course, you can quantify suffering, and you're getting over it. And it is unequal.
Well, your description of things that you didn't absolutely love has not prevented me from wanting to read it because of the things that you did really like. So you did a great job of selling me on it, and I'm sure not only me, Vansa. Thank you so much. Well, I am here to talk to Booktube royalty today. This is Juan from Plagued by Visions. Juan, how exciting to have you on my channel.
Same here. I'm super happy to be here finally. I've been waiting for my invite.
You've been waiting for your invite. Well, I finally got over the intimidation factor and took a risk. So Juan, for the two people out here that aren't aware of you, tell us about you and your channel.
Yeah, so my channel is called Plagued by Visions. It's, I guess, been described as like the horror side of Booktube, but I mean, I really try to read a little bit of everything, but definitely I'm definitely more drawn to darker, sort of more transgressive works of fiction. And it's a space where basically I explore these darker titles and sort of try to show my audience, you know, that they even though they might seem so horrific and and unsavory and just for a lot of people completely worthless or soul crushing, you know, I try to show that they do have some kind of worth to them, you know, that they are approachable and sometimes illuminating works. And I mean, it's kind of tough getting through so much dark stuff like this, but you know, for the most part, I try to just approach it with a level head and and tell people, look, this might be really messed up, but let's consider this point or that point. And you know, I've had a lot of people tell me, you know, I would never read that book, but the way you talked about it, I appreciated it, and I feel like that's my mission statement, basically.
That is awesome, and that's very much applies to today's book, which we'll get to in a minute. But I would definitely say that you don't only talk about horror literature on your channel. I remember one of my favorite videos I've seen on your channel was where you talked about your favorite short story collections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's really fantastic. And I think up until then I had you kind of pigeonholed, and I pulled you right out of that pigeonhole after that. You were very
yeah. You know, I don't mind being seen as, like, you know, a horror booktuber. I mean, I do love horror. I love it immensely, but I mean, I have also a kind of academic background in literature, and I've studied 19th and 20th century American and British literature. I've studied French literature. I've studied Latin American literature. So it's definitely not just horror, but I do love horror a lot.
That is great. And Juan, I haven't watched your very special announcement. Is it something you'd like to do a quick shout out about here? Is it a readathon or something? Your last
no
video?
No, I think it's just announcing that I was setting up a Patreon. That's all.
Okay. Well, yeah. Good. We won't do that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else going on in your channel that you'd like to shout out that I'm not aware of?
Mm-hmm.
No problem if not. But...
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Just,
I strongly endorse Juan's channel. It's very challenging for me to watch some of his videos about horror, and this is a challenging book we've chosen, but it is an absolutely incredible channel, and I'm sure that 98% of you already subscribe. So the rest of you, go check it out. Juan is joining us from California, where he says it's 100 degrees right now, today.
Yeah, today and probably for the rest of the year.
But a dry heat, so that's not as bad as Tokyo 100 degrees. We are here to talk about a book that I have no intention of reading. But some of you out there might be interested in it. It's a French novel in translation, Tomb for 500,000 Soldiers by Pierre Guyotat, translated from the English by Romain Slocombe. Originally published in French in 1967, and the translation maybe is around 2003. This book is this is kind of your sweet spot, my understanding of your reading taste, because it sounds very literary and very horrific. Tell us about this book, Juan.
Yeah. So Tomb for 500,000 Soldiers is often touted as one of the most violent and sort of hard to approach books. And I'd been meaning to read it for a while, but anytime I started it, it was just kind of like, maybe later, and maybe when I'm in the mood. And then it's like, well, what kind of mood can one even be in to read it? But yeah, it was written in the 60s. It was inspired by Pierre Guyotat's own experience being a stationed soldier during the French-Algerian War. And he said a lot of it came to him as a series of dreams that he then laid out on the page. And then, of course, using this kind of dreamlike, surrealistic imagery to sort of air out a lot of the violence and the trauma that he experienced as a soldier during this conflict. When you approached me to do this conversation, you said to be mindful of spoilers, but then I thought, well, we don't have to worry about that because It's not really a linear plot structure that we're dealing with here. It's mostly just a series of vignettes that showcase all manner of atrocity. There's the setting is not really described as any real world setting. It's not really described as taking place in any kind of epoch or decade. It's just kind of any place at any time. There's a conflict going on, and we follow a series of basically vignettes where we see interactions between soldiers and civilians, where we see explosions, where we see death, where we see sexual violence being played out in a lot of different ways. And it's very sort of relentless, but like you said, it's also written with this very kind of lyrical style and this very sort of literary approach to something that is just so atrocious and barbaric and hard to stomach. And I think that's kind of the labor that Guyotat was setting for himself when he was writing it, to sort of maybe see if he could make art out of all the horrors that he witnessed in his life. But also, what that art would look like. How would it even be approached? How would a readership even feel about witnessing that kind of art? Would we want to witness that kind of art? All of it is there, and it's, like I said, relentless and constant for almost 400 pages. And yeah.
So there isn't a narrative through line. How about characters? Do the same characters show up in these various vignettes?
Well, it's very. I don't know if you're familiar with this other book called Maldoror, which was another French novel from the 19th century, I believe. It's a surreal novel written by. It was under a pseudonym called the Comte de l'Autrement, and it's like this highly influential surrealist novel where we follow a character called Maldoror, but not really, because Maldoror becomes various different other characters. There's not really any like solid characterization to him. On one time he'll be this kind of individual, then on another chapter he'll be someone completely different. And like I said, highly influential to the surrealist movement. And I think for Guyotat was kind of inspired by that same thing, because we have an ensemble of characters that are in the novel, soldiers, sex workers, children, and civilians of all kinds, but we don't really follow their plight. It's just kind of interspersed moments when they're stationed in this hellscape of violence, and we don't really get much from them. And it's like I said, it's kind of very dreamlike feeling to it, where you kind of maybe recognize the character here and there. They're kind of similar, but what the action that is happening and what they're going through is just completely up to whatever kind of maybe mood Guyotat was in when he decided to write that particular chapter.
Whatever hallucination. Juan has written one of the most impressive, stunning Goodreads reviews I've ever read. So I'm going to put a link not only to Juan's Goodreads in general, but also to this review. And I'm just going to throw this quote out at you and let you riff on it if you'd like. And it's not even a full sentence. It's you're describing the world of the novel, a world where thought does not reign, and instead the blood and tissue speak poems and lamentations of their own. Can you tell us a little more about that? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's kind of in vein with what I was saying. You know, it's not really a book that's tethered to, you know, human cognition in the way that we might be used to literature being. You know, a lot of literature, especially of this century, like the 20th century, is about interiority. You know, it's about sort of like an emotional landscape that, you know, follows through a certain plot. But for this kind of novel, like Tomb for 500,000 Soldiers, I think Guyotat was just more concerned with letting action and atrocity speak for itself, and sort of maybe having all of that arrive at a broader conclusion about the state of the world. I mean, it's a very kind of pessimistic and nihilistic in that sense, which makes sense given the kind of mental headspace that the author was in when he was writing this. It's about letting the violence speak for itself. And I think that it's a kind of conclusion that he referred to as, and this is kind of crass on his part, so feel free to edit it out. I don't know, but he referred to this literary approach as trying to reach the anus of the world, right? That he was going to write something so unbelievably atrocious and shocking, but in a spectacular way that it would kind of lend to even a kind of spiritual conclusion to, you know, the nature of violence and the nature of pain and, you know, physical deterioration. You know, he was very concerned with that kind of thing. And I think it was also that he himself was a very eccentric individual. I mean, in order to prepare for the writing of his novel, he practiced sexual abstinence for years and years to sort of have the actual, you know, the actual moment of him writing his novel, for it to feel like this kind of release, this kind of pent up rage spurting out onto the page. So it's very much about, you know, the poetics of the body, and it's not so much about, you know, the poetics of emotion or of interior thought. And that also lends to the surreal aspect of it, because it's about, you know, bodies undergoing a kind of violence that in and of itself becomes the narrative. And it's very, like I said, very hard to approach or stomach a kind of narrative like that. And that was entirely his intent.
Thank you so much for telling us about it, Juan. I hope you'll come back someday.
Yeah, I would love to. And then maybe I can discuss a book that is not as challenging.
More of a Sean book?
Yeah. I do read those sometimes.
Yeah. Henk from the Netherlands is back. Henk, hello.
Hi, hello.
That's right. So we can call her an hello.
You talking to the
Yeah,
dog
I'm
about the
online.
dog?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go around there again so you can see the dog?
Oh no, I'm filming this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That was my mom. Sorry. We are here to talk about a debut novel, just came out in May, from an Indian American novelist. It is called The Immortal King Rao by Vauhini Vara. And Henk, you were quite taken with it.
Yeah, no, I definitely liked it a lot. It's a novel about...
Just wait for that dog to stop. I don't know why she's barking now. Okay.
Excited new people talking, so probably. No, I really liked the book. Yeah, it's quite a complex book. It's partly a historical novel, partly family saga, and partly a dystopian novel, all combined together. So you don't often see that in a debut, that people try to cover 3 spots in one go. And basically, it tells about Kin Rao, which is also, of course, in the title. It tells about his life, how he came from an Indian Dalit, so an untouchable caste, and how he moved to America and there built up a company called Coconut, which is kind of like a amalgamation of Facebook and Apple. And later on, we go into more the future, where his daughter is trying to reflect on his legacy and his life, and then you have all coming together in multiple chapters beside each other all the time.
So it is a blend of various literary genres. It's not strictly realistic fiction, but it does have an element of that. Would that be fair?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Speculative fiction, or?
From one part, is more like an Indian family saga. So that's really about young Kin Rao and how he came to be and how his parents met each other. And he growing up in a very large family in the coconut grove. And there you see more like, almost feudal India in a sense. It's just behind World War II. So people are starting to get restless and trying to modernize and become more independent, of course, to Britain. That's a storyline about how he grows up in that kind of family. And then it's like interwoven with the early Silicon Valley times, like he meets his wife, he tries to build up a company, and how that turns out to be. And there it's also a bit of survival of the fittest, because already in the family you have like disputes between family members, between clans, also disputes about money. And of course in the whole Silicon Valley vibe, that much more intense, but of course more civilized with lawyers and everything. There you have that kind of struggle to get on top. And then in the last part, at least chronologically speaking, then you have his daughter, who's trying to figure out how he became very powerful as CEO of a company. And there it really goes into more speculative. It's almost Margaret Atwood kind of Oryx and Crake kind of story. So it's like a corporate behemoth have taken over the world, and you have shareholder capitalism and all kinds of acronyms and stuff. So I must say also the writing style is quite good. I really enjoyed it, how it's been told. And if you have 3 kinds of stories interwoven, then each of the parts I really enjoyed. Well, normally I don't like historical fiction that much, actually. So I was thinking that the family saga might not take me that much, but I really enjoyed it in the end.
So high praise coming from you.
Yeah, quite.
Right. I hesitate to use the word rags to riches in this context, but certainly coming from a Dalit background, he emerged from the lowest of the low of the in Indian caste society and became one of the most powerful men on earth.
Yeah, no, indeed. And it's also funny because indeed, like societally speaking, he is an untouchable, so he's looked down upon by the other villagers and stuff. But economically speaking, the Dalit class, they took over part of the coconut grove, and that's what their fortune is basically built on, because the higher castes look down at more mercantile classes. Because they think that's beneath them, but of course they can. The Dalits can use that to gain an upper hand in the economics, and also in India that's modernizing. Then they use that to send, for instance, their oldest son, which is Kin Rao. Kin is actually his first name. Rao is his surname in the book, and it's also laughed upon in America because who would call his son Kin? But in the end, he makes up for his name, of course, as CEO. He's been sent to America by his family because they do see potential in him, and they have siphoned off some of the funds through all kinds of manners to give their offspring a better future.
Well, I am sold, Henk. Thank you so much for telling us about it.
Yeah, thank you.